Hello, all. Today, a very important episode we are going to cover because today we are going to talk about Chandigarh. Chandigarh is an experimental city, the city beautiful, the post independent experiment that India did with city planning. And to talk about it, we have no other than architect Jit Kumar Gupta. Welcome, sir, this morning.
Good man. Good man.
I'll introduce Jit Kumar Gupta, sir. Sir has a professional and academic experience of over 51 years. That is half a century in urban planning, architectural education, policy planning, and planning legislation. He was the founder director of College of Architecture, Bhaddal, which I happen to be an alumni of, and he's a past advisor of town planning at PUDA. He's also a senior fellow at IGBC, former IIA, ITPI, former vice president of IIA, members governing council of IBC, current chairman Chandigarh chapter of IGBC, member state level traffic advisory committee of Chandigarh, and also senior consultant of 6 master plans of Punjab, including Chandigarh master plan, Srinagar master plan. And he's authored 7 ebooks on planning of architecture, and healthcare facilities, making cities better place to live, heritage conservation, making and unmaking of Chandigarh, architectural education, housing for all, planning for sustainable cities. But today we are going to focus on his book, which he has released as an ebook available free for all to read. The link of this ebook is available in the description below for this video, and the book is titled Making and Unmaking of Chandigarh, a city of two plans. So, sir, I mean, I'll just simply start asking the questions if it is okay with you.
Thank you. It's
Yeah.
both an honor and pleasure to be with you, and particularly with Radha Singh, whom the most favorite student, I think that's a great looking at you. I think we feel honored. Our students have done so well, and we're proud of you.
Thank you so much. So, sir, can you tell us about the background of genesis of Chandigarh? As in how it was the phoenix that rose out of the ashes of partition and all the related grief and distress.
In fact, Radha Singh, if you look at the history of Chandigarh, I call Chandigarh a city of crisis. In the sense, this city was conceived in crisis, it was planned in crisis, it has been, designed and built in crisis, and it continues to be in crisis. If you ask me what are those crises, the crisis of very concept of Chandigarh comes in the partition of India. When India got partitioned, Pakistan was created, and there were two states in the country which were partitioned. Rest, either they went to Pakistan or they went to India. They were West Bengal and the Punjab. In fact, Bengal was lucky, they could retain the capital city of Calcutta. But in case of Punjab, we were not fortunate. We lost Lahore to the Pakistan. So this was the first crisis. The second crisis was, you know, the city, how, who will build the city? Because they wanted this city to be one of the finest city. So they had to find out a person who could do justice with this. And Pandit Nehru, then Prime Minister, they were very clear that there are no people in India who have that kind of understanding of the global concept and the new ideas. So they said that we have to search people from outside. And that time you can understand the only college of architecture was the JJ College of Architecture. The second college of architecture came up only in, SPA Delhi, that too in a polytechnic, in this near ISPT. But since there was no available, so this was, a team was under Albert Meyer was selected to evolve the design. But unfortunately, the partner of Albert Meyer, that's Mathew Nowicki, he was the key man who was doing designing. He did a lot of work on Chandigarh, but he was blessed with the son and he went back to, Japan to meet his wife. But on way back, the plane crashed. And therefore, unfortunately, Mathew Nowicki died. And Edward Meyer said, since we have done the job and since he was dependent upon Mathew Nowicki, so that was the second crisis. He said, I've done the master plan and please find somebody who can implement the master plan. But the government was very clear, that no, we need a person because city has not taken off. So therefore, the city needs to a person who can lead it right from concept to the reality. So therefore, the crisis was to find in the second time, and that's how Le Corbusier came in. Thirdly was the crisis, when in 1966, again Punjab was bifurcated and Haryana was created. So therefore, you could see, that there was a conflict. Punjab, the Chandigarh being the capital of this Punjab. So Punjab claimed it their right, Haryana claimed it their right. Ultimately, it was decided that it will be a joint capital of both the state and will remain independent union territory. So that remained a crisis. So now you can see, the way the city has been growing. The city was never conceived to be a city more than 1.5 lakhs, but it has already become a metropolis. So that, the crisis of growth and development, that is a rapid growth and development. That's what I am trying to convey here. Thank you.
Absolutely. If you could show us the book on the camera. So this is the
Thank you.
books that Sir has written, Making and Unmaking of Chandigarh, a City of Two Plans. So, Sir, I want to ask you this question. Thank you so much for showing us the book. You have mentioned that despite its relation to crisis, Chandigarh became the role model for city planning and management. Do you agree that Chandigarh, as of today, still retains the title of being that role model?
In fact, I could say, even after it started in the year 1948, you can believe it, when India just got partitioned and we never had, the best of the planner or architects in the country. But the way it has been done, I think in that crisis, I'd said, the crisis of money, I would say. The city had only 10 crore of rupee. Can you believe it? 10 crore of rupee is spent on the planning of, the UNO building. And here the city was in Geneva, that headquarter was spent 10 crore of rupees. And here the entire city was to be developed in 10 crore because the state, because we were partitioned and it was state and we were badly hit, and we had no money at all. But look at this. Even Chandigarh at that time, even with paucity of money, there was no technology. Can you imagine the entire city has been built without any mixer, All everything has been done manually. All these transportation of concrete was immense, concrete was conceived to be one of a material which was not known to India, and Corbusier brought concrete, and can you understand, the entire concrete was mixed with the hand. There was no mixer. They were all transported on donkeys, Can you believe it? All animals were involved and human beings involved. And then, see the way the city has been planned, the way city have been developed, the way the city has been managed, and the way the architecture has come in out of the those crises. I think it speaks of a distinct character Chandigarh has. Unfortunately, I would say Chandigarh has so many novel ideas which have yet not been understood and appreciated, which are still lying hidden in the files of Chandigarh capital project, because they could not be implemented. But even, I'm sorry to say, even after 7 decades of launching the city, we have not been able to produce or replicate Chandigarh as a model anywhere in the country, despite the fact we have so many architecture colleges, so many planning schools, and we are so advanced in technology. The city remains unique, I would say.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So we'll take up that question, but for now, I want to talk about you mentioned about Albert Mayer. So you say in your book that we are doing great injustice by forgetting the valuable contribution made by Albert Mayer and Mathew Nowicki. Can you tell us what their important contribution was, which makes Chandigarh a city of two plans and not just one?
In fact, the very title I made it of the book, that's a Chandigarh, a city of two plans. People think, Corbusier came, he planned everything, and he's the author of this city plan. But nobody understands that what work before he came was done by an earlier team led by Albert Meyer and Mathew Nowicki. Can you believe it? The amount of work they have done It's stupendous work, and that, forms the basis what Chandigarh is today. So by, what I'm trying to say is Albert Meyer had done the total study of the city, prepared the master plan. He even fixed in the master plan, the total master plan for the city. He evolved number one. Number two, he fixed the position of four important elements. That was the capital, where the administrative complex would be there. Secondly, the university. Third was the industry. And fourthly was the city center. So all the four elements of the city, they had already been defined there. So they prepared a master plan, number one. Number two, they fixed the location of this. They defined the total agenda for the growth and development. They even prepared the plan for the residential sector, and they did a lot of studies of the commercial center as well as the capital complex. So in fact, they had that they had done so much work. They are already evolved. They have prepared the service plan. They do everything, and they are all stocked in the vocabulary or library of Chandigarh administration. But unfortunately, that work has not come out, and it has not been shown to the people that what work was done before Corbusier was brought in. Because Corbusier, I said, was brought in after Mathew Nowicki died, and Albert Meyer said, we have done the job, this needs implementation, but government said no. I said, government wanted another architect. That's what the search for the Corbusier came in, and Corbusier was never brought in directly, because it was only first the Maxwell Fry and Jane B. Drew, two English people, architects. They were, in fact, identified to lead the city. But they said, if you want to have a good leader and a person who have a vision of the global concept and who is modernistic, they said, please bring in Le Corbusier. And Le Corbusier, when he was brought in, I would discuss with you what was the agenda given to Le Corbusier. Le Corbusier brought in Pierre Genre because he knew if anybody could implement this, he's the gentleman. Because we will discuss about that, how Corbusier. But the contribution made by Albert Meyer, Mathew Nowicki, they are enormous. They have not been taken note of. They have not been appreciated. They are just, hidden in the boxes. I wish those need to be brought out so that people understand the genesis of the city. Because the second plan is an outcome of the first master plan. Corbusier evolved a master plan in 96 hours. Can you believe it? This Chandigarh master plan was evolved only in 96 hours. And that too, using the basic plan of master plan of Chandigarh evolved by Albert Meyer.
Thank you, thank you. I wish the older drawings, the older plans come out, sir. So, sir, I want to talk about, you mentioned about that Chandigarh has not been replicated. So, in the foreword written by architect Habib Khan, who's the current Council of Architecture president, he says that unlike Chandigarh, India did not follow the Chandigarh model anywhere. Is he right in saying that Chandigarh failed to set any precedents for the future of India?
No, in fact, Chandigarh has set up the standard. In fact, people have not understood and appreciated the context of Chandigarh. Chandigarh is the first city where you can believe it, the entire land for the city was acquired. 9,000 acre of the first phase that was acquired in Chandigarh in bulk. But people say Delhi DD acquired this land in bulk. No, Chandigarh was the first city in this. Secondly, Chandigarh remains the only city which, despite having no master plan, can you believe Chandigarh doesn't have any word named as master plan? And without a master plan, you can develop the city of such a fantastic thing. Thirdly, the kind of quality, the kind of detailing this has been done. You could see, the way, the amount of work which has been done in a government organization in a city, that remains unparalleled. And fourthly, there was honesty of purpose. They were, committed. And can you believe it? Corbusier said, I'm not here to make profit or anything, salary, the amount of money which was given to Corbusier, you would believe it that it will not even be accepted by an Indian architect. He said, I'm not here for earning money, but he wanted that I should be able to put the modelist idea. And can you believe it? This city was never managed by a specialist development authority. It was only a bureaucratic model which was headed by Mr. P.N. Thapar. P.N. Thapar was the ICS at that time, Indian Civil Service that time, who were that time like English time, they were ICS. Now in India, they have made it Indian Administrative Services. He was the man who was put as the capital, head of the capital project, and that three-member team, that led the city right from conceptualization to the development. So Chandigarh remains a role model, and role model in planning, in development, in management, and that has not been replicated anywhere, in the country. No city has been set up on the analogy, on the pattern followed in the Chandigarh itself.
Thank you. Thank you. So you spoke about, large bulks of land that were acquired, and that was an unprecedented step. Villages were razed down, people were relocated, but the city finally took shape. How was the political scene at that time? How could politicians at that time manage to pacify people, with so much relocation? As it's something that, today politicians find it very difficult.
I think this is a very pertinent question which is never asked. We think it was very, simplistic. Government decided that there will be a city and the city came up. No, this was not. And you rightly said that how it was managed. I think if you could conceive that time period, because 1947, India was partitioned and Punjab was partitioned. Most of the people came from Pakistan. So they were already refugees, they have been uprooted. So in 1949, after 2 years, you again tell them you get, uprooted. There were a lot of problems. There were a lot of agitation which have not been reported. Unfortunately, that needs to be seen because people agitated where we will go because we have already suffered. And how many times you are going to make us suffer. So there were agitation. There were, the people rose against the government. But at that time, I think you could see, the people respected government. But I know, there's one time the political commitment was there that the city will be there. So in fact, one of the governor it is said he went and he went to pacify the farmer, and the farmer said, "If you are going to uproot, please kill us." And they said, the governor that time ordered shoot them.
Oh,
To that extent.
oh,
So once it was said, people understood the gravity. The government is keen to set up the city, and there was, no way. So we have to agree. We have to, accept the government mandate and follow it. And that's what. But what was done? They said they try to minimize the amount of land which is required to be taken. In fact, if the Albert Meyer plan has envisaged 18,000 acres of land for the entire city of, 500,000 to be developed. But Corbusier said, let's not get into that. In order to pacify, let's reduce the city. And they said, we will do within 15,000. We'll leave, 3,000 to the people. Secondly, he said, we are not sure this city is going to come up with a 500,000 population because it has no economic base. It's a government city. And this is on record, that there are correspondence between Corbusier administration and the Albert Meyer that let's not design this city in phase in one stroke. Let's divide the city into stages and let first stage be 9,000 acres. So straightway, from 18,000 acre to 9,000 acre, that means rest of the people could stay there. So that is where, that the crisis was overcome. It was basically the government handling, and they wanted this. And that time, our uh, defense minister, Mr. Baldev Singh, he was the first defense minister of India. He belonged to Roper, and he was personally keen. And they took up all this. They pacified, made people understand the moment city will come, you will be lot of gainer. You will have so much infrastructure, so much facility which you have never seen, and this will give you lot of advantage to your next generation. So please cooperate, let the city come, and you city, as city grows, you will also grow, both economically and employment, etc. That was the mandate they were able to convince the people.
So the government used, pressure, slowly releasing of pressure in phases and all the other ways to pacify the people. And on record, it was not easy, to simply get so much land. It had its own difficulties which were met by the government. So thank you for that answer.
Sure.
So you mentioned about Albert Mayer did so much work. So you also said that Corbusier got all the credit. So with all this unfair attention and unfair credit that Corbusier took, who are the other people who really really worked very hard but remain unsung even today? Can you tell us about them?
In fact, I would say the initial team remains very, very critical for the success or failure of a project. So the first team, and which was Albert Meyer, and the second team was the Corbusier, which came. But in fact, that team was, I said, Maxwell Fry, GNB2, and the leader was, of course, Corbusier. But Corbusier brought in his cousin, who was leading, because Albert, this Maxwell Fry and Jane B2, husband wife, they were from England. They were running their own practice, and they said we'd like to work on a project, but they said we'll be here staying for 3 years, And they say after 3 years we'll go back. So they only came for 3 years. Corbusier was a consultant, so he was to be here only for 2 months in a year. So he was coming 2 times, 1 month. So after 6 months, within 6 months, he will come for 1 month only. So he was only coming and going, but he was all at the time in contact that time to lead the city. But the man on ground was Perry Jenray. Perry Jenray stayed for 14 long years. And can you believe it? From 51 to 64, the man was on the ground. He led the city and made this. So people know only Le Corbusier, but they do not know the amount of work Perry Jenray did it, Maxwell Fry or GNB drew it. And because of the, Perry Jenray, the city has become a reality. If you look at the buildings, amount of work done by Maxwell Fry and Jane Drew, it recall enormous. Can you believe the first sector was planned by Jane B2, that sector 22, and that became the role model for planning of all the sectors of the city. So even Corbusier never did the planning. Corbusier was only given the mandate that he will implement the master plan, and he will design the capital complex and one museum. That was the task, and he will be overall guiding the destiny of the city. But the people on the ground, the people who did everything, where Corbusier had minimal of, involvement. It was all because of the team of led by Perry Jenray, Maxwell Fry, and JNB Drew. And the amount of work they done, the amount of the kind of work culture they set in. They were never on the chair. They were always on the drawing board. Can you believe it? In Panchandigarh, you will never have a chair for an architect, even a senior architect. They will all be sitting on the table. They made sure everybody works on the drawing table, not on this. Unlike, today, everybody is sitting on, the architect is sitting on the chair, and architect is not supposed to sit on the chair. And secondly, they brought in best of the people, and like Mr. Doshi, like all the people who matter in the country, like Pilu Modi, who was the man responsible for Indian Architects Act, later became an MP. They had at one time or other, everybody would like and love to work in Chandigarh, because Chandigarh was considered to be the Mecca where they could learn under the guidance of that. So if you even go to the Capitol complex, if you look at the door, of the assembly, that is painted by Lee Corbusier, that is gift of the government of Paris to the government of people of Punjab, In that, there's a full panel of 4 feet by 2 feet. There are 16 or 17 panel which are comprising that huge gate, which is facing the High Court. That's painted by Corbusier. That, can you believe it? And this one panel is given to the team, depicting the team who has been managed. And Corbusier, he said, this is the team which led the city of Chandigarh to make it a reality, and in which he mentioned only 4 people: himself, Pierre Genre, and the Maxwell Fry and Jane B. Drew. And he, can you believe it? They are not in human figure; they are in animal figure. Corbusier puts himself crow. He was, uh, those animals, different crow and whatnot, and they say it depicts that this is the team. But nevertheless, there were other people who worked, like, Aditya Prakashji was there, Mr. Parbalkar was there, Mr. Jit Malhotra was there, Mr. Chopra was there.
PL
So
Verma,
many people.
PL
Mr. P.L.
Verma
Verma was the chief.
and
He
Thapar
was the chief engineer.
and Mr.
He was the
Thapar.
chief engineer.
Right.
P.N. Thapar. P.L. Verma was the man, who made city, who constructed the city right from each and every brick. If the city has that kind of quality of construction, it is only because of Mr. P.L. Verma. P.L.
Right.
Verma was responsible for identifying the site and also making city, on ground.
Thank you. Thank you. So you mentioned about all the people, who remain unsung, and but there was so much contribution. And for all the viewers, if you get an opportunity to go to Chandigarh or look at the photo of the big gate that was gifted by the French government, all the names of the people in animal figures are on that gate for all of us to see. So the next question is related to politics, largely related to Chandigarh. Do you think Chandigarh, as an independent city without much industry and resources, can survive in the long without being either assigned to Haryana or Punjab, or should it remain independent, sir? What do you think about it?
In fact, let me be very clear. Chandigarh is not a planned city, it's a designed city. I'm again saying it's not a planned city, it's a designed city. There's a difference between planned city and a designed city. For planning a city, you need enormous amount of data. You need enormous amount of studies. What is going to be economic base? Who are the people going to come in? What is going to be the future? How the city is going to be economically viable? What will be the employment opportunities available here? So what kind of culture will be there? So all these work, which will be the environment and what will be the ecology? There are so many things, you all know when we prepare the master plan. But when Chandigarh was planned, there was no data available.
Okay.
Nobody knew what this city is going to be. Only one thing was sure, that there is a government which is to be rehabilitated, because government was also refugee. Let me also tell you that when Chandigarh was conceived, the Punjab was like capital of Punjab was moving. In winter, they will come to Jalandhar. In summer, they will go to Shimla. So like, now they do in Jammu and Kashmir. Then summer, they go to Srinagar and they come to, this Jammu in the
Jammu.
winter.
Yeah.
But the same, it was only at that time also in Punjab. So they were shuttling between Jalandhar and the Shimla.
Shimla.
But ultimately they realized government cannot shuttle. Government has to find a permanent place. And ultimately they chose the city, let city be there. But the question remains, I said the entire planning, they were only sure, that this city is going to have government, and government you will have how much, 10,000 people or 15,000 people. That means the government doesn't, they said the city will never have industry. The city will not have economic base. So though the city was destined to be planned for 500,000, I said there was a debate and there was everything going on. And ultimately they concluded, let's not plan for 500,000. Let's split into two parts, half a 1.5 lakh people initially. We planned for 1.5 lakh. And if this city grows, second time, then beyond 1.5 lakh, then we give the, second phase that per 3.5 lakhs, So ultimately, they were only considering that the city will have only 1.5 lakh people, and thus they come to conclusion. But look at this, the way it has happened, because it was conceived to be a city for the government, so the government came, but then they brought in the Punjab, this PGI, Punjab University came in. They brought best of the institution to make the city going, But over the period of time, the city has transformed from a government city to a you know is a city which attracts business, etc., because the kind of quality of life, the kind of infrastructure, the kind of the facilities which are available in this, that's nowhere available around in the northern part of the India. So can you believe it that Kabuzir said, if Chandigarh has to remain a sustainable city, the Chandigarh should not be a capital, this metropolitan city. And can you believe it? Chandigarh became a metropolitan city. Chandigarh achieved its design population of 500,000 within 40 years of launching. 51 it was launched, 91 figure said it's more than 5 lakh. So within 40 years, it achieved this, and city has gone to be metropolitan. So, the city was basically 1966. The growth and development started beyond 1966 when it became the capital of two states and the union territory. And right on this, on the fringe of Chandigarh. In fact, Chandigarh, when they were created Chandigarh, they did only one mistake, that they did not allow the periphery of 8 kilometer or 16 kilometer to be part of Chandigarh. So Chandigarh was just that period. Chandigarh was given 114 square kilometer of area. The area identified for the site of Chandigarh, that is the area. So right in, next to Chandigarh, that periphery is Punjab. There's new capital city of the city of Mohali and Panchkula. So whole lot now Chandigarh as a capital, as a complex, an urban complex, is the fastest emerging and growing complex north of this. The way Chandigarh is growing, I think Chandigarh is heading for a crisis of growth and development, because this city was never conceptualized and never prepared to handle that amount of pressure. So now Chandigarh have to be thought in a different context. You cannot think Chandigarh in the terms of Chandigarh alone. Chandigarh has to be seen in the regional and larger context, and it has to be planned and developed accordingly on the pattern of Delhi, where they have NCR, so that they can decentralize activity. The pressure on the city could be reduced since it's an administrative city. Now there are three governments, which are there. So that is the administrative status is creating a problem for this city. So that is what the mandate is. The Chandigarh needs to transfer from a Chandigarh in four walls to Chandigarh in the larger context. That is the regional context that need to be seen and developed.
So you're hinting at some kind of broader context for Chandigarh, where it is part of something big. Now, what is that something big? That is up to the government to decide. Now, so with respect to, you spoke about peripheral development and what is happening in the periphery. So in the foreword, the chief architect of Chandigarh, architect Kapil Sethia, has says that Chandigarh was built as a finite city. But you in the book say that no city is finite. What do you think is the future of Chandigarh's expansion in the absence of a de facto peripheral control? It exists as a paper tiger, as you said, but there is no de facto peripheral control.
In fact, if you look at the Chandigarh growth and development, Chandigarh remains unique. I said the laws are very simple. There are two laws. One was the Chandigarh Capital Project, Development and Development Act, the simple law, very simple law, which governed the total growth and development of the city. And secondly, to control, Kabuzar was very clear. The day you will develop the city, in India, the people were rushed to the periphery. They will start developing, periphery will develop faster. Unauthorized development takes much faster than the planned development. So he was very conscious, that we have to control the periphery so that there is no haphazard, unplanned, substandard development, no slums come out. And I said the city was only designed for the stage one. They had just to, the next 3.5 lakh people was to be accommodated. And let me also explain to you, the concept of planning of Chandigarh was in three stages. Stage one, that will house 150,000 people in 9,000 acres. Stage two will be very high density. That means 6,000 acres hosting 3.5 lakh people. And Kabuzer was very clear. Tomorrow, he says, if city achieves a population of 5 lakh, God forbids him. He says where the additional population will go. We all would do, all would say, sir, we will acquire another land, we will extend the sector. Kabuzer said, no, Chandigarh will maintain as a finite city. And he said, stage three of the city, that means to absorb population beyond 5 lakh, it will be re-densification of stage one. Because the density of population was 16 persons per acre in the phase one. It was 56% in phase two. That's 3.5 times more than the phase one. And he said additional population will come in the stage one itself. That means re-densification of stage one. So that is what he thought of the total framework. This unfortunately stage three has never come. They have never been thought of. They have never been implemented. But that remains another agenda. How government does it? Kabuzer said, let the government decide. In 64 he writes a letter, and I will give you the technical solution how the city can do the stage three. So Chandigarh, Kabuzer conceptualized a city as a finite city. He said it will not grow in terms of physical domain. Of course, population he was not freezing. But we have seen the cities are not dictated by the planners. City have their own mechanism. So their decision making is not rest with planners. There are residents, there are political system, there are builders, there are people who have their own agenda in the city. They are all drivers of this. So ultimately, as a planner, we cannot define and freeze a city. This is a fallacy. If we try to freeze a city, we must allow a reasonable growth and development of the city, but without compromising environment, ecology, quality of life, and undue travel and traffic in the city.
Absolutely, absolutely, sir. So when you say, without hurting ecology, that means, as Corbusier himself said, re-densification of the phase one. That means simply that, in one way you have to increase the height. So, but Chandigarh today remains a low height city, but being rapidly surrounded by high rise and all the businesses eventually shifting to the surroundings. Look at Mohali, look at Panchula. Do you think Chandigarh is refusing to wake up from a dream that it appears to be in? Can solutions like multi basements that were recently rolled out do any good?
In fact, I would say we planners have lost the tracks. We have not been able to understand most of the development which you see happening is basically driven by colonizer and developers. They are copying from abroad and they are asking, and all the, can you believe it? In Punjab, FAR is unlimited, height is unlimited. That means you can build to whatever extent you want, cover as much area as you can. Can you allow this kind of permissibility to anybody? City needs infrastructure. If you are increasing the height, they have their own implication of disaster. Are you able to take care of water supply, sewerage? Because all infrastructure, traffic, water supply, sewerage, they have all to be, matching the amount of population which you are hosting. You have no idea. We are only saying allow them. If Singapore can do it, why can't we do it? We quote the example of Singapore, we don't follow their systems, you know. They have a very controlled system. They know what they are trying to do it, you know. If can you believe it? Singapore said we have already given about 12% of the land under roads. We cannot afford any additional land under the roads. So they have stopped giving new licenses for purchase of cars, you know. So this is, you know, how they do it. But question remains, you know, that we have to look for sustainability. And I said Kabuzir did, you know, that if at all the city has to be expanded, we have to control, we don't have to, you know, melt the city. We have to make city in a four walls where they are there. But he said what I'm going to do is he tried to put in this where you know in phase one, stage one of Chandigarh, there are large plot, even plots of 4,000 square meter. You know. And he said we will club those larger plots, you know, and have very small built up area so they can have the height, but they can increase the density, but they leave the larger area. Otherwise, you know, now this is a distributed area under individual plot. But once you club those plots, you know, you will have a huge chunk of land, and out of which, like Marseille block, the FAR is 3. But can you believe it? Ground coverage is 5% and the number of stories are 60. The plot size is 10 acres. That means out of 10 acre, you are only covering half an acre. Rest of the 9.5 acre, you are leaving, you know, open. So even if you are at 60 story, you see ground all around, you know, and every plot on 10 acre, you know, have only 9.5 acre open and half acre, you know, built up. So that whatever infrastructure what we need, they are already thought of, they are provided. But I think as a planner we have to understand, are we, you know, trying to provide space? Are the city for commercial exploitation? Are we going for a greed or for a need? You know, I think that is the issue. So we have to think about the typology. Why are we giving plotted development to people who's not underused? No, why don't we go for flatted development? You know, where the sizes are fixed. So everybody, there is city is equitable, you know. It is not city which is hijacked by rich people. He can afford money, he buys, you know, and he's living in 2 acre of plot, and there is a man who doesn't cannot get, you know, in a slum even 200 square feet of this. I think city has to be inclusive. City has to be equitable, and I think planners have to think about this. The people, the city is, there has to be ownership of the city, and let city be owned on a cooperative basis rather than exclusive ownership. The day cities are on the basis of cooperative ownership, that means everybody owns a city and he has a stake in this. Surely there will be more equity and there will be more rationality in defining the agenda, you know. That is what. But I think India is in a very peculiar and a disadvantaged condition. We have 2.4% of the global land and we have 16.7% of the population. That means we're already in a very adverse condition. And I think planners, we have to think about, you know, that how to minimize the conversion of land, accommodating this. So we can have options, you know, city on the ground, city below the ground, you know. So where we, you know, we can have all transportation going down and city are just for walkable city rather than, you know, motorable city. So we have to, as a planner, look for new option, as architect, new building typologies which consume minimum of land but provide equitable quality of life. That's what I think this issue will remain, the question will remain to be answered.
Absolutely, absolutely, sir. So, sir, today we were highlighting the book written by architect Jit Kumar Gupta, sir. That is the Making and Unmaking of Chandigarh, a city of two plans. And we have covered the most important points and issues that were raised in this book. Which include, the contribution of the previous architects who were responsible for the city development, which includes, why Chandigarh, has not been replicated, which includes how difficult it was to, acquire land to make Chandigarh, and we talk about the future of Chandigarh and so many important points in this particular episode today. Now, sir, for all the viewers, first of all, the book is available in the description below of this video for you to download, read. And if you have any questions, you're free to please write in the comment section below, or with the we'll provide the mail of sir. You can always directly contact sir for any feedback on the book, any questions that you want to get answered. But answer, I would request you, after covering so much, first of all, I would like to thank you, and I would request if you could, leave a good message for the viewers about Chandigarh, about the book, and about the future of cities in India.
Thank you, Raja Singh. I think it was a great interaction, understanding and explaining the book for the first time. I never had an opportunity to talk about this book. But I wish if the readers could read this book, I think it will give some kind of idea what went into the making of a city. Cities are very difficult, cities are very complex, cities are not easy to understand and appreciate. Cities have their own mechanism, and it has taken a lot of energy, lot of input, lot of, I would say, wisdom in making of the city. And it was collective wisdom of the people, and they were the best people. They were very sincere, they were very committed, who despite all these odds, and they were able to do a best of the job. You can see, the amount quality, the amount, and the quality of construction, the way they have planned and designed. I think people think that Chandigarh architecture came as a pre-conceptualized idea. In fact, I would add here, Albert Meyer had already done most of the design of the houses. Corbusier, when he was brought in, he was only to implement the master plan, not to this. But when he was signing on the agreement, JNP Drew asked Corbusier, what are you going to do if you have to sign on the dotted line? You have to implement the master plan. What are you going to do? Are you going to be draftsman or this? He says, Jane, let me sign, and then I will let them know, what Corbusier is. So what can you believe it, in 96 hours, he flies over, they prepare the master plan. And Corbusier, had, Albert Meyer plan would have been there, city would have been curvilinear like American do it, They would have a super block, But he made this, he was totally hating the state line. He says curves are ruinous. Can you believe it, Corbusier? Why he made the gridiron pattern? Because he hated the the curves, and he made them a straight line. He says curves are ruinous, And he said straight line has a meaning. Life, you go straight, you have a destination. You know where you are going to there. So that's what he removes all those kind of curves, And secondly, Corbusier, established the credibility of profession of architecture and planning. Before Chandigarh came in, nobody even understood the role of architects, the role of planners. Chandigarh established the credibility of the architects and planners. Chandigarh was the first city to have a chief architect. Can you believe it? And the amount of nothing could move without the approval of the this architects. So they established the credibility of the profession. If architecture is today valued, and there are posts which have been created and planners which have been accepted, it's all have genesis in the Chandigarh itself, because they did so much work. They made sure, the architect, earlier all engineers were doing the job. They say only architects and a planner can do this kind of job, and they made sure that they even dictated that this is engineers have to follow what architects have to do it. So that is what the credibility. Secondly, they were able to evolve. He says the city is to be built. Then they say everybody will build the city. And if you go to earlier, there was right, there were marla plots, there are small plots, and they gave the freedom because there were no architect at the very few architects who were there, and they are asked architect to plan the city. And then when the building came up, and they saw somebody was coming in forward, somebody was going. And if you are ever in sector 22, right in the corner to 23, you can see the initial development came. And when they saw this development, he says, this is just like a Ludhiana or Jalandhar coming in. And they said, are we going to have a Jalandhar or Ludhiana? Then they said, nothing doing. We will have controls. And can you believe there are 9 kind of control they put in? 8 kind of control within the city. Ninth control was the periphery, which then. So the idea of control, was given by Chandigarh. Of course, it was done in the Jaipur city where they had, defined the height. But here, each and every building was put under control. And secondly, then they said when they said we will redesign the houses, they said, no, 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 we have already done the job. We have already, the Albert Meyer had done the design, everything. We are in a hurry. We want the government is under pressure that we have to construct the city very rapidly. So you can't do it. Kabuzir assured, and Piri Janre and Jane B. Drew and Maxwell Fry said, please allow us. And can you believe it? They said, we will do the same job. We will, because PWD prepares the estimate, and they say estimate has been prepared, amount has been fixed, and this space is fixed. You can't do it. They said we will do within this, and they did it. And can you believe it? The Chandigarh architecture came out of the paucity of money and the material available and the climate. So brick was used. Why you say Chandigarh has a only box type structure? Because the wood and the glass was 7 times more expensive than brick. So if they had to cut down the cost of the building, that means they had to minimize the your woodwork as well as the glass. And that's what Chandigarh has, very narrow kind of, those openings, etc. And can you believe it, 1950, 51, and I still remember, I came to Chandigarh in 1964. In Batala, I was there where I was educating. We were still using dry latrine. In Chandigarh, in 1951, everybody in the city, even the poorest or poor PN, was using the flush latrine, which we can't dream of even today that we are providing to this. And this happened in 1951. And Chandigarh at that time establish the standard of living, minimum 2 rooms. Can you think of? Now we are, even after so many years, we are saying give 1 room. But that Chandigarh said, even we will give 2 rooms to the poorest of the poor to lead a dignified. So you had all water supply, you had a flush latrine, you have piped water supply, you had electricity, you had minimum 2 rooms to live. Who can provide that kind of thing? And that came out of the wisdom, that came out of the commitment of the architects, that they were able to deliver. And wherever they had to economize, they use that bricks, they use brick jalis. Brick was used extensively, what this has been done. And I can tell you, the first high-rise building of 50-story would have been in Chandigarh. The secretariat would have been a 50-story building. But the government refused. And they said everything had to be imported, the material, the technology, everything. They said, we don't have money. They begged off the Kabuzir, and that's where Kabuzir reduced it to 10 story. And you can think of 10 story going up, you would need lift. How that lifts were very, very expensive that time. 53 or 54, you can think the cost of lift. They wanted to reduce. And those seas do 2 ramps, one in front and one in the back. Why they were constructed? Because the material was to be transported up above, and there was no crane. They were all being done by donkeys. And donkeys, they could not, go up or pull down. They could only walk. They could not have steps. They provided those ramps, so that material could be there, number one. Number two, people could use that subsequently as movement, and number of lifts was reduced. So many innovation they did. And Chandigarh remains, I think, it's a wonderful experiment, but Chandigarh may be having certain limitations that needs to be studied, they need to be looked into, and they need to be appropriately addressed. But Chandigarh, still with all limitation, has been able to do a kind of justice to provide best quality of life, to have, the orderly development, and that showing that without having a master plan, you can still develop a city and provide the highest quality of life to the people without compromising anything. So that was the agenda that city gives. But I think Chandigarh has lot many ideas which are written. Can you believe it? The Chandigarh had a system of cooperative food supply. That means Corbusier has thought of, that entire city will be provided on a cooperative basis. So there was a cooperative agency which was set up, which will procure fresh food, milk, etc., and that will be supplied to everybody. That was, and Corbusier wanted the edges of the two secretariat, those city, they said they should be developed for providing greenery. That means fruit and vegetable. Horse, they wanted to have a, race course there. And he says all the refuse of the race, the horses will be used as a manure. The city will have vegetables and they will be, used for the consumption of city. So there are many ideas which they had put in, but they remains right on the in the files itself as an idea, and he even given the transportation system, for the city of Chandigarh, where he said that there will be three kind of buses will be running, buses with large capacity to runs on the major roads, and medium density, which are on medium capacity, which are run on the V3s, and small mini buses which will run on V4. And you can think of Chandigarh still follows. There are no roads, named after any, you know, individual. They are large roads are called marg, and small roads are called path. So they are all Jan marg, Madhya marg, Dakshi marg, Uttar marg, Puram marg. And if you are a road going to Sarovar, this lake, it was Sarovar path, Udyog path. So they are still Chandigarh is falling. There is no road. Of course, Chandigarh lacks the urban identity because all sectors are looking similar and you get lost. So there is that lack of identities there. But there are a number of good ideas which Chandigarh has, and Chandigarh has a lot of messages, which can be appropriately seen and addressed and utilized in the present context.
Absolutely,
Chandigarh,
sir.
I would just add, Chandigarh had the periphery concept where the city was planned in the regional context. So 16 kilometer of first 8 kilometer and 16, that was to supply all food to the city as a whole. So that was even the idea that city must be planned in the regional context. So you don't source the day-to-day activities from a very large distance. Versus cities function is to provide services, and periphery function is to provide the day-to-day goods for this. And this is the function of the periphery, and the city must not interchange. And if it changes, there will be chaos, there will be crisis. And that's what which is happening in the present context, where we have misused, abused, and we have used periphery for a commercial purpose. That is causing all the problem in this city itself. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. This information was gold. So when you said that a lot of wisdom was required in the city planning, I must say a lot of wisdom has been, also penned down in your book. So it is available for all the viewers to read this book. And please provide your important feedback on the book. Please ask your questions on the book. Sir would be happy to answer these questions. Write your questions in the comment section below. And sir, thank you so much, for taking time out today and talking to us about the book. And it is not only about the book. In this episode, we have spoken about city development, the gems of wisdom that are required, to plan cities, to make sure cities are equitable, to make sure cities, take care of all the needs of the people, take care of the needs of the future growth, and are all comprehensive and all inclusive. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Raja Singh. I think it was both an honor and pleasure talking to you. It was education for me, and I think I enjoyed every moment to be part of this great conversation. So it was first time I was talking about the books, but inside you asked me to bring out, that I never thought of. It was wonderful talking to you. It was wonderful answering the question, and I think it will have some meaning for the listener that they could make out. I think that's my essence. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much
Thank
for
you.
your time.